My name is Brittany Nystrom, and this is for SPCE 689, Section 860, and this is my rule-governed behavior assignment. Today I'm going to be talking about the rule-governed behaviors through the behaviors of Alex, which is in prompt A. He has or she has the self-imposed rule of, if I don't get an A in the class, I'm going to fail. I am going to break this down into three different components, which is understanding the rule-governed behavior, examining how the neutral stimuli relate to the coursework, become his sources of anxiety, and discussing the results of avoidant behavior that he may experience. So first we're going to analyze it. That if I don't get an A in the class, I'm a failure. This is a prime example of a rule-governed behavior. Rule-governed behaviors refer to the actions that are influenced by verbal rules or statements rather than the direct experiences with the consequences of those actions. In Alex's situation, this rule is not based on actual outcomes, like failing a class or receiving feedback from a professor, because we don't know that. But this is rather on his internal dialogue. Alex has established the strict criteria for success for himself, and his behavior is now being dictated by this rule instead of the natural consequences of his academic efforts. This is distinct from contingency-shaped behavior, which is developed through direct interaction with the environment. An example of this is had he previously failed a class, he would have learned from that experience. His behaviors would have been shaped by those real-life consequences. However, in this case, Alex's anxiety arises from the rule that he has created, not from first-hand experience or failure. Again, we don't know what happened in the past, we just know what he has set for himself. So part 2 of this is going to be the transformation of his stimulus function. We're going to talk about how his rule transforms neutral stimuli into anxiety-inducing triggers. So typically, elements like deadlines, assignments, or even casual interactions with professors wouldn't provoke any strong emotional responses. However, because Alex has linked his self-worth to achieving an A, these neutral stimuli become sources of anxiety. So, for an example, a simple assignment deadline might now feel like crisis because he has to get it done. Feedback from his professor could be perceived as a sign of inadequacy and not perfection. So, seeing syllabus or hearing classmates discussing grades that are higher than his potentially can trigger these feelings of anxiety and self-doubt. This is known as the transformation of stimulus function. His internal dialogue of, if I don't get this A, I'm a failure, now changes his perception and how he reacts to these stimuli. What was once neutral now feels threatening because he has tied the fear of not meeting up to his own standards. For part 3, we're going to discuss the transformation that leads to avoidance. So Alex might begin to steer clear of situations that remind him of the failure. So an example of this within school is procrastinating on assignments because the thought of starting them can be overwhelming. He could avoid seeking help from his professors because they could either confirm that he is inadequate, or he might take the feedback and think that is a negative thing instead of relying on the feedback to do better. He might isolate himself from classmates to dodge conversations about his assignments and grades because if he's not the best, like if he doesn't have the best grades, he's not the best. You will never be as good as the person next to you. So these avoidant behaviors are being reinforced through negative reinforcement. Every time he avoids that stressful situation that he is putting himself into, he may or may not be getting some sort of release from the anxiety, like, okay, I'm not comparing myself to you, we're both good. So this relief does reinforce the avoidance, making it more likely that he will continue to respond this way in the future. So, unfortunately, this is a cycle that is hard to break that he will continue being in unless he changes his rule. So, by avoiding the task related to his coursework, he risks falling behind, which is only going to increase that anxiety because the lower his grades are, the worse he's going to feel. So, all said and done, his rule, if I don't get an A, I'm a failure, is a clear example of the rule-governed behavior because it stems from his internalized verbal rule rather than direct experiences. This rule transforms a neutral coursework stimuli into sources of anxiety, which lead to that avoidant behavior. Recognizing his pattern is the first step of breaking free from the cycle that he's put himself in. But by understanding the impact of their private verbal behavior, Alex can start to change their rigid rule and develop healthier approaches to their studies. This is something that he needs to work on so that he's not going to fail.